If you would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Roll call. Commissioner Atkins.
Here.
Commissioner DeLarge.
Here.
Commissioner Mace. Commissioner Caswell. Commissioner Tellman.
Here.
Commissioner Kirshen.
Here.
Commissioner Beresny.
Here.
Commissioner Helen. And the chair is here, I hope. Call to the public. Do we have anybody that wishes to address the commission this morning?
Chair Bickle.
Commissioner Beresny.
Point of personal privilege, please.
Sir.
Okay, so I want to discuss real quick an item that's going to be on the Board of Supervisors agenda, number 57, agenda item 57 on Tuesday's Board of Supervisors meeting. That is a procurement action through the Recorder's Office that is going to have a contract with Runbeck for automated sorting and possibly signature verification. This action was signed by the Recorder back in May, and I feel since it is we're an advisory board to the board, or advisory panel to the Board of Supervisors on anything pertaining to elections in Pima County, then this action should have been vetted or should be vetted by this commission before it's discussed at the Board of Supervisors meeting. So I'm requesting, and I know it's unique and it's out of the outside of our bylaws, that this item be added to our agenda for today.
And I appreciate your concern, but I think relevant to the discussion that we're about to have, we can't do that. It's not permitted under the open meetings law.
Okay, then as the right of a commissioner, I am requesting an emergency meeting for next Monday afternoon to discuss that procurement action here by the EIC. And I'm notifying the staff of that right now. So if we could canvass, and this is pursuant to our bylaws, Article 6, that we discuss this on Tuesday afternoon. So if I'm notifying staff, so Chair Bickle, I don't know if we can do a canvass of the commissioners right now to get a vote, or if this has to be done via normal process via email.
Commissioner Tellman, and this has turned into an item of business that is not on this agenda. So we'll defer it till later in the meeting, and hopefully Mr. Jerkowitz can give us some advice on how to proceed from here.
Okay.
I understand your concern, your position, and we will handle it as we can legally and appropriately.
Sure. No other way.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience that wishes to address the commission? Mr. Brakey. And please identify yourself for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name's John Brakey. I'm with a group called Audit Elections USA, based out of Tucson, Arizona. We work all over the United States, and you know, I have not been here in I guess since 2017 or 18. This is a commission that is very, very important, one of the first in the country I discovered. that we started a long time ago. And in the last couple of years, I've gotten very involved in Maricopa, the audit that happened, and things that came out of it are very, very important. And this handout has links to important stories, and one is very important, is Bill Reisner on June 8th did a presentation that really went into the history of voting in Arizona, and it was very fascinating in this film what you're going to find. You're going to find also Mimi Kennedy, who came in, Progressive Democrats of America, because many of you may know that I have a bill working with Ken Bennett that would make Arizona's elections transparent, trackable, publicly verified, utilizing ballot images in the cast vote records, which is really a wonderful system. Other states are doing this. It's interesting. In my situation, I work in Florida and I work in New York, and there I only have Democrats I'm working with. And because of my intervention getting involved in the fraud, I made a lot of Republican friends, and I was helping them understand how elections really work. And out of this, one particular person I made great friends with, I call a brother, is Senator Ken Bennett, former Secretary of State, former President of the Senate, and currently back into the Senate, particularly because he sees a solution that our country really needs badly. And I'm asking you to watch the film here, investigate what we're doing, and thank you very much. I know my time is up. And I'd be glad to answer any questions now or later. My contact information is there. Truly, our country needs elections that we all can believe in. I run around the country telling people I'm not here to talk about the problems that divide us. I'm talking about the solutions that unite us. And having elections that are verifiable to the people could really do wonders. People talk about the 2020 election and how that was one of the highest turnouts in 120 years. 80 million people didn't vote. A lot of people don't know that. And they don't know that, let's say, for example, is that elections of the past have really changed, and now people are demanding elections that are provable. And the key is in the CVR, in the ballot images, releasing this stuff by precinct 2 days after the canvass, and then have people trained to be able to run an Excel spreadsheet, which is very simple. But anyway, I've taken enough of your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else that wishes to address? Peter. Please identify yourself for the record, and you have
Sure.
3 minutes.
All right, thank you, Brian, and good morning, Commissioners. My name is Peter Norquist. I am also coming today to speak in favor of House Bill 1560, which was just mentioned by Mr. Brakey. This is a bill that I hope you will recommend that Pima County officials will support. It's a nonpartisan bill that promises to provide greater transparency in elections and to address the growing distrust in the election and recording system that has resulted from lack of transparency due to actions of both major political parties in the name of security, something that is a constantly moving target, whether sometimes by accident or design. The core of HB 1560 is this. If records are released to the public, particularly the CVR and the ballot images, then the public can verify the results themselves. The bill provides voters with 4 sets of data to confirm Arizona's election results. The first 2 data sets allow voters to see that only eligible and qualified voters cast a ballot. The 3rd and 4th data sets would have allowed voters to compare a digital image of every paper ballot to the way that ballots' votes were recorded in the final results spreadsheet. This bill is not a panacea. It is not able to address the front-end problems, which are the domain primarily of the recorder's office, such as ballot harvesting and signature verification issues. But it goes a long way in resolving back-end issues, which are the domain primarily of the elections department. To this extent, it will improve voter confidence in the system and at least discourage tampering once ballots have entered the pipeline from the recorder to elections. Confidence in election results is good for all political parties, voters, candidates, election officials, and our country. If citizens see that the vote counting process is concealed, taking place behind a cyber curtain and in a black box, is it any great surprise that they begin to question the legitimacy of the election results and lose faith in the government? There's a solution to this lack of transparency, and that solution is ballot images and CVRs being made publicly available in every state in the U.S., not as the sole decider of any election, but as a transparent, easy-to-access verification of election results in conjunction with other audits. In closing, I've been told by members of this commission that to obtain the CVR for Pima County, I would need to sue for it. If the entire process is above board and there is no question regarding the integrity of the election system, why make it so difficult to obtain the CVR? Interestingly, despite the fact that Katie Hobbs recently vetoed the most recent version of this bill, our current Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes, supports it. Despite the reasons given in Hobbs's veto statement, what this really signals to the public is that she believes she has something to hide, whereas Fontes doesn't. The only way to discover which of them is actually right is to allow transparency with no caveats and no strings attached. I appreciate your time and attention this morning.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Laux. Please identify yourself for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Tim Laux. I just would like to bring attention to a couple of matters today. First of all, people, paper, and programs. Those are the things that determine our elections, and we have issues with all three of them. You can have a great system on paper, but people can mess the whole thing up. We have too many issues with our mail-in ballots. But I would like to bring attention to Runbeck. The Board of Supervisors is talking about a $330,000 contract with Runbeck. This is the organization, of course, that prepares the mail-in ballots. It's my understanding that the county recorder creates a PDF file. Somehow it makes it up to Phoenix. I don't know how, if they send it over the wire or they send them a CD. I don't know how that is, but we'll find that out eventually. The equipment used at Runbeck is not certified. It's not certified. And Runbeck has several buildings all throughout the U.S., several different states. They're probably the #1 provider of ballots in the country. So we have no idea how this information is transferred, and I also understand that Runbeck prints the ballots. They don't mail them. They bring them in a box truck down to Tucson. And we don't know what the security is on that. If the driver decides to stop at a pilot to go to the bathroom, is that truck secured? How many people? Are there people from both parties or all parties that are following this truck? And I know Constance spoke to this last year. I'm going to have to go back and listen to it, but I don't believe there is appropriate security. The biggest issue, another one of the biggest issues that we have is signature verification. Veto Katie, as I call her, just vetoed a bill that put standards on signature verification. We have no standards for signature verification, and this is a big part of the problem. Many of us have seen the video where you've got two people next to each other. The person on the left is going click, 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 click. Every time a new ballot shows up, the person next to him does 5 of them, while this person over here on the left does 50. We have no standards, and so that is something that we desperately need. Thank you.
Gisela, identify yourself for the record.
Good
and you
morning.
have 3
My name
minutes.
is Gisela Aaron, and I live in Tucson. Today, I would like to address your agenda item 5B, equipment certification requirements. I also have questions about Runbeck and why I copied Runbeck employees. Does Runbeck hold logic and accuracy testing? Are there bipartisan observers there? Who are they? Does Runbeck meet Arizona state laws, ARS 16442B and HAVA 2002 requirements? ARS 16442B states, machines or devices used at any election for federal, state, and county offices may only be certified for use in this state and may only be used in this state if they comply with the Help America Vote Act and if those machines and devices have been tested and approved by a laboratory that is accredited pursuant to the Help America Vote Act. Now, Arizona has codified this into state statute law, and it is mandatory for machines and devices used in elections in the state. So, although Runbeck is a private company, they would also have to follow state law, that's what I believe, and provide certificates of accreditation by a testing laboratory sanctioned by the EAC. Reminder, none of the testing labs are legally accredited, and there's also a matter about the breach of contract. The Secretary of State should provide proof that Runbeck's machines and devices, including programs such as ballot adjudication and signature verification programs and softwares, have been tested to the state standards ARS 16442B and HAVA. When will Runbeck hold their logic and accuracy testing? When is there bipartisan observers there? And reminder, ballot duplication done on computers with internet access are not allowed per state laws. The signature verification process is supposed to go to the signature on file of the original voter registration form. But when I observed it here, I saw that they utilized other records such as the assessor site and the motor vehicle department site. And that's not allowed per Arizona statutes. They are supposed to go to the signature file for the voter. I assert it is illegal that signature verification and ballot duplication are outsourced to a third-party vendor. In addition, the Electronic Registration Information Center, ERIC, I assert it is illegal to outsource the voter roll maintenance process to a third-party vendor. Arizona Secretary of State and the recorder cannot have any oversight of an office located in D.C. Both Runbeck and ERIC are DNC partisans, and they cannot be trusted. So I have here your contract, and I looked at it, I searched it, and I could not find any certificate of accreditation for Runbeck as a requirement.
Your time is up.
Labor of Ethics Uyghur certification needed and Israel boycott certification needed, but not for accreditation of the machines, not even one line. Something to look into. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that wishes to speak? Seeing none, we shall move on. It is a requirement that we do a review of the open meeting law on an annual basis as members of a governmental entity. We do have a presentation via Teams this morning by County Attorney Representative Dan Jerkovitz. Mr. Jerkovitz, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
It doesn't appear that the microphone that's supposed to pick up your computer is working. Just a minute. We have a little bit of a technical issue on this end.
So I'm going to speak as loudly as I can and as slowly as I can. If you have any questions, please just let me know. My name is Dan Jerkowitz. I am the Assistant Chief Civil Deputy in the Pima County Attorney's Office. We're going to talk a little bit about the open meeting law in Arizona this morning. The primary purpose of the open meeting law is to ensure that business by governmental bodies that would be conducted at a meeting is conducted in the open so that the public can listen in and ensure that they are aware of what's going on. The decision making is not being made behind closed doors and smoke-filled rooms, that the decisions are being made in public that everybody can scrutinize. So ARS 384431.01 says that meetings of public bodies shall be open to the public. Anyone can quote unquote attend and listen to deliberations and proceedings. All legal action, that is collective decision making, must occur in a public meeting. And in order for that meeting to occur, the first thing we have to do is provide notice and an agenda of what's going to be occurring at that meeting. So the meeting has to be properly noticed, and the notice must include an agenda sufficient for a member of the public to understand what's going to occur at that meeting. So I know as a member of the public whether I want to attend your meeting this morning based upon what's on your agenda. If you start talking about things that aren't on the agenda, maybe I didn't come to your meeting because I didn't think you were going to be discussing it, then I've been deprived of being able to listen in on that deliberation. ARS 38431.09 says that any person or entity charged with interpretations of the open meeting law shall construe the open meeting law in favor of open and public meetings. So if there's a question, we're supposed to default to making sure that the meeting is open and that the public has an opportunity to listen in. So who does the open meeting law apply to? It applies to all multi-member public bodies. That includes governing bodies like the Pima County Board of Supervisors. That includes boards, commissions, committees of the state and political subdivisions, including standing committees, special committees, advisory committees, and subcommittees. So the Election Integrity Commission is a commission. It's an advisory committee of the Pima County Board of Supervisors, and the open meeting law applies. And any subcommittees, standing committees, or special committees of this commission, the open meeting law would also apply to those. So what is a meeting? Under ARS 38431.4, a meeting is any gathering of a quorum of the members of that public body, in person or technologically, where legal action is proposed, discussed, deliberated, or taken. And a quorum is defined in ARS 1-216B as a majority of a board or commission. And that's interpreted to mean a majority of the total number of members as set forth in either law or the bylaws of that public body. So, for example, if your commission had 9 members, then a quorum of that commission would be 5. So what is a meeting? A meeting under ARS 38431.3 is a collective decision, commitment, or promise made by a public body pursuant to the Constitution, the body's charter, bylaws, or specified scope of appointment and the law. It includes an exchange of electronic communications among a quorum of a public body that involves discussion, deliberation, or the taking of legal action by the public body regarding a matter that would be likely to come before the public body for action. That includes one-way electronic communications by one member sent to a quorum that proposes legal action, such as, I think we should support option 3, or we should do this in the future, or whatever. I can't text that to you. I can't email that to you. I can't tell you how I'm going to vote on a particular matter, or how I think the body should vote, or what we should do in a particular situation. Now, there is an exception to this, and it's called the media communication exception, because if I'm communicating to the public, then obviously the public has an opportunity to understand what I'm discussing and hear the position. So ARS 38431.09B says it is not a violation for a member to express an opinion or discuss an issue with the public through the media or other form of public broadcast communication or through technological means if it is not principally directed at or given to another member, and not a concerted plan to engage in collective deliberation to take legal action. So if I am, for example, a member of the Board of Supervisors, and I want to express my opinion about an upcoming agenda item, and I give an interview to one of the local television stations or the Arizona Daily Star, and I communicate how I feel about a particular issue or how I'm going to vote on a particular issue, that is an exception and is not a violation of the open meeting law. So again, for a proper meeting, you have to have a proper notice. You have to have a proper agenda. The public has to have an opportunity to quote unquote attend. That does not necessarily mean physical attendance in most cases, but as long as they have an opportunity to attend, if you can have a virtual meeting, for example, where nobody's in person, that's perfectly acceptable as long as people have an opportunity to listen in and hear the deliberations. And we also have to take minutes of what occurs at the meeting. That notice as to when the meeting is going to be had, that must be conspicuously posted on the website of the body, stating where the public notices of meeting will be posted, such as in the clerk of the board's office, both physical and electronic locations. Posting meeting notices on website and additional notice as is reasonable and practicable. So we also have to post that on our website. And so for this body, that's going to be on the clerk of the board's website. Each board, commission, and committee of the county has a page where all the notices and agenda are posted. The notice under ARS 38-431.02C has to be at least 24 hours prior to the start of a meeting. It must be given to the members of the public body, and it must be made available to the general public. There are some minor exceptions to this, so that if you've noticed a public meeting and the body recesses and is going to reconvene within 24 hours, we don't need to renotice, because at that public meeting we've provided adequate notice that the reconvening is going to happen. If there is an actual emergency, which is very limited, within 24 hours after that, and if there's been a open meeting law violation and a matter is not legally valid and the public body wants to ratify that, then that has to give even more notice. It has to be 72 hours notice. The notice must include the name of the public body, the date and time of the meeting, the place, the physical address, the website, whatever the means of communication or meeting are going to be, and a copy of the agenda items. Notices for virtual attendance should clearly state that the meeting will be remote by technological means and provide the website or a link to connect with directions on how to do so. Provide a conference call number for telephonic attendance and provide support for questions or difficulty accessing the electronic meeting. What goes on the agenda? ARS 38-431.02H says that we have to list the specific matters that are going to be discussed at the meeting and provide information reasonably necessary to inform the public and members of what that item entails. And when in doubt, the default should be to provide more detail rather than less detail. So a public body may only discuss, consider, or make decisions on matters that are listed on the agenda or other matters that are necessarily related thereto. And that is a very, very narrow exception, as long as it is addressing an agenda item or something that is inherently necessarily related to that agenda item. So some of the common pitfalls on an agenda are where the item is described in an incomprehensible manner to a member of the public by using, for example, legalese or acronyms or technical terms that a general member of the public would not understand. So if I just said, today we're going to be discussing the ICOML, not everybody would understand what that means. So I need to spell that out in the agenda that we're talking about the Election Integrity Commission, and we're going to be discussing Arizona's open meeting law. We cannot have non-descriptive categories such as new business or old business or announcements or reports or open discussion or just period training. We need to specifically say, this morning, the Election Integrity Commission will be getting open meeting law training. There is one general category that is statutorily permissible, and that is current events. ARS 38431.02K says specificity where the presentation by the chief administrator, presiding officer, or member about current events is permissible if current events is on the agenda and the public body does not propose, discuss, deliberate, or take any legal action as a result. It is not a catch-all for items not properly on the agenda, but if there is something that comes up in current events that you would want to discuss, then you put it on an agenda for a future meeting. So public attendance, and I put those again in quotes. ARS 38431.01A, F, and G says that the public may attend, listen, tape record, and video, as long as it doesn't interfere with the conduct of the meeting. They do not have a right to speak, except unless it's specified in statute. Call to the public is an optional thing that a public body may engage in. If they do so, then the public may speak, but there are limits upon what happens at a call to the public. It is not an opportunity for a dialogue or to discuss items that are not properly agendized. It is just for the member of the public to provide their perspective on whatever they want to talk about. But it is not an opportunity for then the members of the public body to start discussing that item unless it's already on the agenda. There are three things that the public body can do. They can respond to personal criticism that is leveled at them. They can ask staff to review that item, or they can put it on an agenda for future discussion. The public cannot disrupt the meeting. Public attendance, we cannot require the public to sign an attendance sheet unless they are speaking at a call to the public, and we're doing that for minute-taking purposes only. We cannot hold a meeting at a remote location where the public could not generally access, so I can't decide to hold this meeting in Ajo, where the majority of the county is not going to be able to attend unless there's an availability for the public to attend remotely, such as on Teams or online in some fashion. We generally cannot hold meetings in a small meeting room where most of the public would be unable to attend, just so the public could not attend. We have to hold it in a reasonable location for that public body. Not every public body has a meeting room that can accommodate hundreds of people. So certainly the meeting room that you're meeting in now would be an appropriate location for this particular public body. We also cannot hold meetings at unreasonable times. We can't hold this meeting at 11 o'clock at night, just so members of the public could not attend. As I said, call to the public is optional. It is not mandatory. Time, place, and manner restrictions are permissible, so it is permissible to limit the amount of time per speaker. It is possible to ban repetitive messages, and it is possible to prohibit disruptive behavior. If the issue is not that the member of the public raises, again, is not on the agenda, members cannot discuss themselves or engage in a dialogue with the speaker. And again, at the end of the call to the public, members may instruct staff to study the matter raised, place the matter on a future agenda, and respond to personal criticism. For virtual meetings, the best practices would be that to ask individuals who are speaking to identify themselves when speaking, to ask everyone to put themselves on mute when they're not speaking, to include copies of presentations or documents that will be discussed with the agenda and post relevant information on the website, and to record the meeting. Now, there is a statutory exception to discussing things in public, and that is for what's called executive sessions. Under ARS 38431.03A, a body may meet behind closed doors and not in public for specified purposes such as discussing personnel matters, reviewing confidential records, for legal advice, to discuss litigation and negotiations and settlements with attorneys, for salary discussions, for purchase, travel negotiations, sale or lease of real property, school safety operations, and security procedures. But it has to be specifically for one of those listed exceptions in the statute. The only people allowed into the executive session are members of the public body, a person who's the subject of the personnel discussion, the auditor general, the clerk of that body, the body's attorney, and those whose presence is reasonably necessary, such as a relevant staff person. Minutes are required, and those minutes are strictly legally confidential. So the meeting minutes under ARS 38431.01, the general meeting minutes must be kept and made available to the public. Those may be written or recorded. Those must be available within 3 working days, 10 days for subcommittees and advisory committees, and in a form that is readily accessible to the public. The minutes must include the date, time, and place of the meeting, the members present or absent, the general description of matters discussed, and an accurate description of the actions taken by the public body at the meeting. The minutes must have the names of each speaker in relation to their items, any members attending by telephone or electronically, the names of other remote participants and procedures followed, a description of any emergency if it's relevant, and a disclosure statement if you're ratifying a prior act that was nullified by a violation of the open meeting law. So there are several pitfalls to open meetings. Those are serial meetings, a splintering of the quorum, spoken wheel meetings, email meetings, and social gatherings, and I'll discuss each of those individually. So what are serial communications? Serial communications are statements communicated from one member to another. So I can't engage in that childhood game telephone where I communicate to the person on my right, and that person communicates to the person on their right, and that person communicates to the person on their right. If the total number of members is equal to a quorum, then there's been a meeting. And if the communications were not on an agenda at a noticed meeting, that is an open meeting law violation. Splintering and polling. Splintering the quorum or polling is a violation that occurs when members have a separate or serial discussion with a quorum and relay the information received from each member to the others. So I meet with, it's perfectly acceptable for me to meet with one other member on, if the public body is greater than 3, one other member of the public body, and have a discussion about a future agenda item and say, hey, what do you think about this issue? How do you think you'd vote on this? Okay, that's perfectly fine. But then I go to a third member and I say, here's what I'm thinking about this. I talked to this other person and here's what they think and here's how they're going to vote. That is a polling where we've just communicated and had a meeting of a quorum. That's a public meeting, that's a violation. And so the recommendation is to avoid here even the appearance of impropriety and not engage in those type of discussions with other members of the public body. We cannot use our staff people to do things that we cannot do. This is the spoken wheel example. So I can't use the staff person for the public body to go ahead. For example, with the Board of Supervisors, I can't use the county administrator to have the county administrator go to each member and talk to them. Here's what this person's going to do. Here's what this person's going to do. The staff or other person who knowingly helps evade compliance are also subject to sanctions. They cannot do that either. We want to make sure that all discussions and deliberations occur in public. Bottom line here is it can be a violation to conduct discussions even between less than a quorum if the purpose is to circumvent the law. One of the problems that folks often fall into are emails. Under ARS 38-431-4B, you cannot use email or other electronic communications or any other communication. I can't do it by snail mail either. To propose legal action, discuss legal action, deliberate upon legal action, or take legal action. Email among the quorum is a meeting, and it's a potential violation. Passive receipt of an email from staff is okay if a response is limited to the staff person, but you cannot use that staff person to evade compliance. You should never reply all to a communication made. So if the staff person emails out, here's the notice and agenda for the meeting, I cannot reply all and say, here's what I think we should do on item 7. It's a good idea to have an open meeting law reminder in all email communications. Save it for the meeting. Another issue is what happens at social gatherings. So there's an event or a social gathering, and that could also become a meeting if a quorum are at the same place. So if that happens, we're at the same political function, for example, we have to be careful not to discuss anything even remotely related to the business of the public body. And so one of the things that some folks do is they prophylactically notice a meeting even when they're not going to be discussing anything, and just say there's going to be 2 or 3 members of the public body at this particular function. We're just giving notice to the public for transparency purposes. No discussion will be held on any item that would potentially come before the public body, but just to be transparent, we're all going to be in the same room. But let's say that we did, unfortunately, discuss an item that was not properly on the agenda, and then we took a vote on that even though it was not properly agendized. That's a violation of the open meeting law. It has no legal effect. It is null and void. However, we can come back and properly notice it on an agenda for a future meeting and ratify that result if it is taken within 30 days of the discovery of the violation, and then that would be valid. It does not cure the open meeting law violation. The open meeting law violation still occurred, and there could be consequences for that, but we can cure the action that actually occurred. Ratification must provide notice 72 hours before the meeting in which that is to occur. It has to describe the action to be ratified, state that there's an intent to ratify a prior action, where the public can obtain a written description, and all deliberations, consultations, and decisions that preceded and related to that action must be included. So there are penalties for violating the open meeting law. And since all of you are voluntarily giving of your time to serve on this important commission, we want to make sure that you don't personally face any penalties for being civic-minded and volunteering your time. So there are a number of penalties that can be applicable. So as I said, unless timely ratified, actions that are taken in violation of the open meeting law are null and void. The Attorney General, the county attorney, can bring suit for violations, and a court can order compliance. Typically, what's going to happen if there's a open meeting law violation is that the Attorney General or the county attorney is going to request that there be refresher open meeting law training, because we want to encourage compliance, and we really don't want to stick people with penalties if we have to. But if there is intentional non-compliance, then there can be significant penalties. And a court may impose a civil penalty for knowing violations by a member or anyone that aids, agrees to aid, or attempts to aid in circumventing the open meeting law. And for a second offense, that civil penalty can be up to $500. And for subsequent offenses, it can be a fine of up to $2,500. The court can also award attorney's fees, and if the court finds that a member intended to deprive the public of information or opportunity to be heard, that member can be removed from their office. Those penalties cannot be paid by the public body. That has to be personally paid by the member. And the public body cannot hire counsel to defend open meeting law enforcement actions unless there's specific legal authority to do so. Bottom line is focusing on transparency keeps you out of trouble, and it also builds public trust. There are a number of additional open meeting law resources that are available to you. Each member is supposed to review the open meeting law materials before taking office, but if you go on the Pima County Clerk of the Board's website, there will be links to the Arizona Attorney General's Agency Handbook, which describes in great detail the open meeting law requirements. The Arizona Ombudsman also has a link there, and they also describe in more layman's terms the open meeting law requirements. I would encourage, if you have any questions, to go back and look at both of those documents, and you can find those on the Clerk of the Board's website. Are there any questions about any of that material?
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Jerkowitz?
Yeah.
Commissioner Berezni?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Jerkowitz. Appreciate it. Can we go back to the time frames for emergency meetings? I think I heard you mention 24 and then a 72-hour thing. Can you give some clarification on how much notice is needed for an emergency meeting? And just go back and discuss that real quick.
Well, so this public body here is not going to have emergencies. I'm just letting you know right now. An emergency is something where there's like an immediate action that is required for, like there's a public disaster and the Pima County Board of Supervisors needs to meet and declare a public emergency and exercise immediate requirements to authorize particular actions. This commission is not going to have public emergencies. So you can notice a meeting within 24 hours, and that's going to be sufficient. Short of that, there's not going to be an actual emergency.
Okay. Thank you. I was just wondering, because in our bylaws, in Article 9, Section 6, it does
So you can,
make provisions for an emergency meeting.
so you can have quote-unquote emergency meetings. That's going to be different in your bylaws versus what's talked about in state statute. And again, you can call a meeting at any point depending upon what your bylaws say. As far as the open meeting law is concerned, all you have to do is provide 24 hours notice to the public that they are aware of when that meeting is going to be held and what items are going to be on that agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Jerkowitz, other than me? I do have a question. We did receive information last night, this morning, supporting one of the items on our current agenda, but it was received well after the deadline for public notification of the meeting. Is it permissible under the open meeting law to consider that information in a discussion at this meeting, even though it wasn't available at the time the agenda was posted?
It's really difficult for me to answer that question in the abstract. So generally, the public body can discuss, and the information that is available to the public body is whatever information is available to the public body. As long as the public is aware of what agenda item is going to be discussed, that's what the open meeting law is concerned about. Now, if there's a specific report or something like that, let's say it's the Pima County Board of Supervisors discussing the budget for the county, that's got to be provided, in my estimation, at least 24 hours prior to the meeting, so that people have an opportunity to review those materials and be able to adequately determine whether they want to come to the meeting and speak about those budget items and talk about whether or not that's appropriate funding for those types of things. That's not something I think that you could keep in your back pocket and just spring on the public, 5 minutes beforehand. Without the specific, whether that would fall of your particular situation, I don't know whether that would fall into that kind of camp. As long as, if we're discussing something that's coming before this commission as far as where polling locations are going to be across the county, and we have a list of what those are, and something changes and one of those locations is no longer available, I think that's something that is legitimate to discuss at the meeting, as long as it's been properly noticed that we're going to be discussing where the polling locations are in the county. Does that kind of answer that question?
Kind of. Given the situation that you had the either misfortune or the privilege of hearing earlier in the discussion regarding the issue that's going to be taken up by the Board of Supervisors next Tuesday, is there a way that if this commission held in what our bylaws define as an emergency meeting that's been properly noticed, that we generate a report that gets submitted to the Board of Supervisors, even though their meeting has been publicly noticed already? Is that a permissible act on the part of the Board of Supervisors, or is that something that they're not allowed to take into consideration?
Need a lot. So again, I need a lot more details to analyze that particular question, and I don't want to, unfortunately, my primary duty is to be legal counsel to the Board of Supervisors and not to this advisory committee. So I'm going to decline to answer that question, because that would be a question that I would have to answer legal advice to the Board of Supervisors for.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Mr. Jerkovich, thank you for your presentation. Very informative.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time, folks, and thank you for your service.
Okay. In my haste to get to the open meeting law clarification, I jumped over the approval of the minutes from May 19th. So I'm assuming those were distributed to members of the commission. Does anybody have any comments, suggestions, additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, without objection, those meeting summaries are approved.
Motion to approve.
They don't need to be moved to
Oh,
approve.
okay.
Next item on the agenda, equipment certification requirements. This was put on here at my request. I really don't want to get terribly into the discussion today because of the information that I received last night and early this morning, that I ran out of gas about 11 o'clock last night and didn't have time to get through it to the degree that I would like to. But I will tell this group that one of the things I've learned more about HAVA and the Election Advisory Commissioner, the Election Assistance Commission, than I thought I'd ever need to know. One of the things that I think needs to be kept somewhere on the front burner rather than the back burner is in 2002, HAVA stipulated that the creation of the Election Assistance Commission, and they stipulated the creation by that commission of guidelines for the certification of equipment, and all of that is voluntary as far as HAVA is concerned. Now, under Arizona statute, that changes, but how that applies in our situation, what is and what isn't considered certifiable, and I know, and I put this up under the topic of current events, there are currently issues that are being discussed that make peripheral election devices and materials certifiable that have not been certifiable in the past, most notably BOD printers. It is being discussed, and for those of you that didn't see the article in the Arizona Mirror, apparently Maricopa County is about to expend $8 million buying some very expensive printers so they don't have the problems that they had at the 2022 election going forward. Although the question I would have for the people in Maricopa County is, why did you think you needed to put the ballot on 100-pound paper? I mean, I don't know that it wouldn't be able to do it, but I would look for difficulty with the DS-850 handling cardstock paper, given the paper path that ballot's going to have to go through, and the number of 180 my questions that it takes in the course of moving through that paper path. So my question for somebody that's more familiar with Maricopa County's issues is, why did we feel 100-pound stock was required as opposed to 24-pound stock, which I think would have been more than adequate. So when we get to the agenda item number 6, I will recommend that this discussion be posted as a future agenda item again. But if there's anything that anybody else would like to add to the discussion, I'd certainly be happy to entertain comments at this point in time.
Chairman.
Commissioner.
I wasn't aware that was a problem with the stock of the paper. Why was that not discovered by the Accuracy Certification Board up in Maricopa County?
I don't know, and I don't know that they ran LNA tests on 100-pound paper, but that's what the ballots were printed on, was 100-pound paper. That's what I've seen reported. And I can tell you, using a home printer, which is not nearly as robust as the Lexmarks that the elections department is using, but trying to get 100-pound paper through a inkjet printer that's going to turn that paper 180 degrees with a relatively small radius. It's something that is problematic. And Vanessa, I'll give this to you so you can make copies and get it out to the rest of the commissioners. Any other comments on that issue? Commissioner Tellman.
Constance provided us with an extensive report. I went, pardon me. I wonder if she could just give us a very brief summary of the report that she submitted.
Am I on? Yes, okay. So the gist of the report is that the voting equipment that Pima County uses is certified by the EAC test labs and certified by the EAC, has been certified by the Secretary of State. And before each election, before logic and accuracy testing, the Secretary of State actually requests the information of what version and which type of equipment we're using to make sure that we are using the certified version. And if we are not, then they will not allow us to use it in an election. So this happened twice last year. As far as the EAC, there's also a letter stating that they acknowledge that there was a gaffe, I guess, in their certifying of the test lab, but their statement is that until they decertify a test lab, the test lab stays certified. And so that is really the gist of the report, that, it is on the EAC website. All of this information can be found on the EAC website. Each test lab, when the test labs were certified, the voting equipment, the versions of the voting equipment, when each version and upgrade is certified, is all on the EAC website, as well as when the Secretary of State actually certifies the voting equipment in Arizona, and they just went through a certification for Dominion and ES&S for upgrades recently, and they approved the certification of those upgrades.
Thank you for that. One of the things that I learned in looking through this is there is a little bit of a issue as far as compliance is concerned. I did read where the statement is once a testing lab is certified, it remains certified unless that certification is revoked by the EAC. The flip side to that is they require recertification every 2 years. Now, that logically doesn't make sense to me. There are issues, I would say, in briefly looking at the material that I received last night and this morning, there are no issues with the certification of the software by the testing laboratory. There's no issues with the certification by the Secretary of State's office. What I believe the issue that is being raised is the certification of the testing laboratory by the Election Assistance Commission, and the documentation that occurs, and the instruction manual for the voting systems testing laboratory certification. What I haven't had time to get into yet is who writes the manual for the instructions to the testing entity for the voting systems testing laboratories, and who approves, if there's any approval required for that, which is why I said this is something that I think bears significant further discussion, but it's something that I want a little bit more time to digest thoroughly myself before I crawl out on that tree branch and run the saw through the branch behind me. It is an issue. One of the things that, just so it doesn't muddy the waters anymore, the volunteer voting systems guidelines, the VVSGs, that are required by HAVA and created by the EAC are changing November 16th of 2023. Testing laboratories and certification agencies have operated under VVSG 1.0 and 1.1 since 2005, when they were first disseminated. What's being released to the public, if it hasn't been already, will be shortly, is VVSG 2.0. And what that means is any manufacturer of voting equipment that is applying for certification after November 16th of 2023 will be being certified under VVSG 2.0, not VVSG 1.0 or 1.1. However, any entity that has certified equipment that has been certified under VVSG 1.0 and 1.1 will remain certified. This is a go-forward issue, not a regressive issue. So, and it applies more to people that are applying, VSTLs that are applying for certification, and entities that are applying for certification, manufacturers that are applying for certification of equipment after November 16th of 2023. So it doesn't have any effect on equipment that's currently certified.
That is correct. And you said that very eloquently. That is very plain English. Yes, the VVSG2, the vendors will have to build to those standards in order to get anything certified after November. Yes.
And I don't know how that affects, I know based on discussions that I've had with Mr. Wisely, we are looking at some modifications and upgrades to the package that we currently have. Has that system been certified, or will it be certified under VVSG 2.0?
Chair Bickle, it is certified, but not under VVSG 2. What it was certified is certified under the 1.0, but they made it the upgrades in such a way that it would be an easy transition into the 2.0 certification and upgrades whenever they need to do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions from anybody else? Commissioner Tellman.
What specific components of our processing have to be certified? For example, do the printers have to be certified?
Commissioner Tillman, not at this time. No, the printers do not have to be certified. What the Arizona revised statutes state is defines voting equipment as the scanners, any tabulating equipment that would be used. So if we use tabulating equipment in the vote centers, that would have to be certified. The scanners that we use in central count have to be certified. The election management system is certified, and the accessible voting equipment that we use in the vote centers has to be certified. But that is the extent of it right now.
And electionware.
Oh, yes, sir.
electionware.
I'm sorry. The election management system is the electionware. Yes.
And what about the poll books?
No, ma'am, there's no certification for those right now. Right, there is voluntary certification out there with the EAC right now for electronic poll books, but there is no requirements at this time, even in the state of Arizona.
Yeah, and they are specifically exempt from certification in statute. It does say e-poll books are not certifiable. Certification is not required at this time.
Thank you.
But there is enough concern over what's happened in the last couple of elections, not just in Arizona, but nationwide, that people are discussing whether peripheral election equipment needs to have some sort of a certification process. It is in the very early stages, but it is something that is being discussed.
Yeah, Chair Bickle.
Commissioner Beresny.
Yeah, so the way I read it, when I read 16442B, well, 16442 is titled tabulating equipment and semicolon exceptions or whatever else. But then in 16442B, it says machines or devices used at in the state election or federal only be used as they comply in the use with the and only be used if they comply with the HAVA. So, you know, that's a problem that we have in the writing of our statutes. Because when I look at a machine or device, I'm looking at any machine or device that's used in the electoral process. You know, that would include the voter registration database, e-poll books, you know, any kind of automated equipment. So, you know, so I know I've heard in the past that we've used the tabulating equipment, and that has to be certified, and I understand that, but there's a lot of concern out there that since 442B says machines or devices, and it doesn't say specific tabulation equipment, then we need some clarification on that. Because that's, to me, and the wordsmithing that I've done in the past, that's a major concern for a lot of people out there, and so that's why it gets questioned so often.
Yes, Commissioner Beresny. So devices would be the accessible voting equipment that we use in the actual vote centers because they do not tabulate. So they're considered a device. So it's a voting equipment, but they do not tabulate.
Okay, so the what in the voting center?
The express votes that we use,
Okay.
the accessible voting equipment, they do not tabulate. So they have to be included in voting equipment, and therefore they are a device that we use, but not actually something that tabulates votes.
So they have to be certified because they don't tabulate?
No, they have to be certified as voting equipment,
Oh.
but they do not tabulate.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Commissioner Curson.
I know I've brought this issue up once before at a meeting. The equipment certification requirements seems to me that our logic and accuracy certification board is part of that certification of our equipment. And even if we in Pima County didn't make the mistake of using a different stock of paper for the LNA test that we did in the actual election, standardized ballot paper that is known in advance and is used in the LNA test and in the election, I think is a necessity. And the fact that ballots can be printed on any piece of paper in theory, and the stock of the paper may have been at fault up in Maricopa County for some of their problems, I think that that's something that should be considered for a further ballot item, is to recommend standardization of our ballot paper for all elections.
I don't disagree with you, and bring that up again when we get to agenda item number 6, future agenda items. Thank you. Commissioner Tellman.
State, Secretary of State's Procedures Manual will be completely revised, and I'm not sure what the deadline is, but it will be within the next year, and that is one of the things that should be part of that manual, rather than a local decision. And I think once they're starting to do the procedures, that should be on a regular agenda.
And I would also say that, not just the paper weight, but the paper length, because one of the things they did mention is there's a possibility that this would have been a bigger faux pas had we had a 22-inch ballot instead of a 21-inch ballot. So if you know you're going to have, I would agree with you that whatever the ballot style in the actual election is going to be is the same ballot style, not just style, but size, paper weight, and everything that would impact the election should be the same if you're doing a true logic and accuracy test.
And I agree with you. There was other aspects of the standardized paper that I think were relevant, and something like, and it was suggested in some statutes that were considered by the state legislature in the past, some sort of watermark on the paper to identify it as a ballot. And in light of some suggestion that the ballots up in Maricopa County, some of them may have been printed with the wrong size so that they had to be copied because the PDF was slightly smaller than it was supposed to be. That's been suggested by some people. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but a watermark that defined where the ballot image was supposed to appear could be part of that standardized ballot also.
Yeah, and I think we're getting a little bit off the agenda item.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments, questions? All right, next agenda item, legislative discussion. I just had this put on there. I haven't received any kind of a paper update from Mr. Rossi, and Mr. Rossi is not here. So I would make a clarification for the minutes. When Peter was speaking during call to the public, he identified the bill as HB 1560. It's either SB 1560 or HB 2560, but House bills start with a 2 and Senate bills start with a 1. So, and I believe it is HB 2560 that, or is it SB 1560? There were 2 bills. Okay. Okay, update on the ad hoc committee work. Commissioner Beresny.
Thank you, Chair Bickle. In my haste in leaving my home in the southern part of the county today, I grabbed the wrong portfolio, so I had some notes in there, but I can give you a quick update. We met 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, a couple weeks ago, to go through the process. And so what we did at the elections department, and I want to thank Jeremy for all the hard work that he's done on the process flow right now. We took all of the major components that he had outlined to date, placed them into the block diagram on where the appropriate place would be, just to give a high-level view of the process itself. We went through each component within each sub-process, like within tabulation or voting, and identified where in the block diagram that specific item would be. We did find that we still had some things that still needed to be added. For instance, we have nothing on the process on how voter registration information is included in the database itself, and there's a number of ways we can do that, either through the Secretary of State or through the Motor Vehicles Division, Service Arizona, the voter registration forms that we collect, throughout the years at voter registration events, and then also by the use of ERIC, which is that nationwide consortium or group that the state has an agreement with, and the recorder's office uses that to help identify people in the county that have not registered to vote yet. So those types of things need to still be flushed out. We had a couple more things that's under the purview of the elections department that still needed to be flushed out. There will be a couple more items that we're going to have to add, especially if that procurement action I spoke of earlier takes through. Then there's something in the provisions where the equipment that's may be procured can automatically update the voter registration database. And so there's still some things that need to be flushed out in the flow chart itself before final submittal to the whole commission.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Commissioner Beresny? And I saw your hand, but we cannot interact with the audience. Just so you know, I wasn't trying to be rude. Okay, future agenda items, discussion of certification, however broad, or the broader the better. That's current certification requirements and potential certification requirements. So that gives us what is and what may be.
I have something, Chair Bickle.
Commissioner Beresny.
Yeah, discussion on the contract as for procurement going to the Board of Supervisors on the 20th of June, titled Runback Election Services. Project title description is Mail Ballot Scanning and Sorting Solution. There's a number of questions that need to be answered on that.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Commissioner Tillman.
Yes, the item that had been proposed for this but was not done because the recorder was not here, namely discussion of signature verification and what is required there. Secondly, re-precincting, I think, should be ready to be discussed in the July meeting.
Okay. And I believe you sent some comments on re-precincting to Director Hargrove?
Yes.
Or do you have an objection to sharing those with the rest of the commission?
No, I have no objection.
Okay.
Could not share them because
I
of the
know
open
you,
meeting
I
law.
know you couldn't share them, but if you have a copy of those, Vanessa, would you please distribute those to the rest of the commissioners?
Yeah, and I will be submitting some comments also that we've gathered from our legislative district chairs.
And if you'll submit those comments for distribution to
Pardon me?
Vanessa, submit those comments to Vanessa for distribution, please.
Yeah, I'll send those comments through.
And one other item, some of us will be monitoring the city election, and while that isn't under the jurisdiction of this commission, anybody who would like to monitor, I think it's very useful to see how the city does things, which is very similar to the county, but there are some differences. And also, there's a city primary and a city general election, and there's also talk of TUSD doing an election in November on their, I believe it's a bond, capital bond. And I wonder if we could do any negotiation with the city so that people do not have to have two separate mailings, and the city would cooperate with the county as they have once in the past that I know of. I'd like to see some discussion on whether there's any negotiations possible with the city on that.
Okay. Did you get all of that, Vanessa? All right. Next meeting date, July 21st, 2023. Does anybody have any problems with that?
No.
Okay. No other business coming before this commission. This meeting stands adjourned.